Big Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Big Apple Blitz. What is going on? Matt O'Leary alongside Anthony Rivardo. Anthony, how's it going, my friend?
Going great, man. I had an awesome weekend over at Fanatics Fest as a member of the press for Fireside Giants. Got to see Sauce Gardner on the last day over at the 40-yard dash interactive area. I got to see a lot of Giants legends and really cool panels. I had a lot of fun. Did get to watch the first half of the preseason game in the media workroom on Saturday for the Giants. Didn't get to see the second half. Had a lot more pressing matters at hand, but I saw the first half. And I was nauseated. It was gross. It was ugly. It was not fun to watch. It almost put a massive stain on my weekend, but thankfully Fanatics Fest was too cool and couldn't ruin my weekend that badly. But Daniel Jones, he almost did it. He almost ruined my weekend.
That the year 6 leap was not happening on Saturday. We will get into that. Loved all the videos that I saw from you coming out of Fanatics Fest. So if you don't follow Anthony on Twitter or X, whatever you're calling it, make sure to do that and get in on all the action there. I love this comment before we start from Peter, our guy here, who is obviously a legend. Says the breeze up here, he lives in Hudson Valley, has the fall feeling, which means football. I know that you don't have that right now in Florida, but can confirm on Long Island as well. I stepped outside this morning, had a little bit of that crispness in the air, and it was that first, oh shit, here we go. We are so close to football being all the way back.
Yeah, meanwhile, here in South Florida, it's about 105 degrees when you go outside. You sit in your car, you melt, your eyeballs fall out of your face. It's terrible. But I was on Long Island for the weekend, and the weather was much preferable to what I experienced down here in Florida. Wish I could go back. Wish I still lived on Long Island. Definitely jealous of the feeling of fall, which you just don't get in Florida. There is no fall. There's the wet season and the dry season. And the wet season is much longer than the dry season. So it's constantly raining. It's not the sunshine state like people say it is.
There we go. So let's get into it. We put it off as much as we could here in the intro, but this Daniel Jones situation, man, it was rough. I think that's putting it lightly. I know last week you were ranting about wanting to see Daniel Jones in the preseason, but that might have been premature after that performance. Maybe we don't need to see more Daniel Jones.
No, I think that's kind of the perfect thing to bring up here because we heard instant reactions to this game on Saturday. Everybody saying it was his first game action in 9 months. You got to give him time to get off the rust. And I was like, then why did he not play last week? I went on this rant. I had people in the comment section coming after me. Now you see how rusty he was. They threw him into the deep end and just immediately made him play an entire half of football. Why not give him a drive in the first preseason game to get his feet wet? That makes so much more sense. If you know he's going to be rusty, if you know that he's going to need to take some time to get back to game speed, why didn't he play that drive with Malik Nabers in the first preseason game against the Lions? You had other starters out there. You had Jalen Hyatt out there, Wan'Dale Robinson, Malik Nabers, obviously. Why not Daniel Jones? Josh Allen played. Patrick Mahomes played. CJ Stroud played. This is the same rant that I went on last week, and I'm going on it again because it's even more relevant and even more important now. That first preseason game, giving Daniel Jones even just a drive. If he goes 3 for 6 passing, looks like crap, he could shake it off and get ready for a much better performance in the second week of the preseason. Instead, he didn't play at all. He goes into the second preseason game super rusty against a really good Houston Texans team, plays like crap, and now here we are. All of the fans are reacting, saying we're not going to win more than 5 games this season. Again, this feels like it could have been avoided. The Giants just let him play 6 snaps or whatever the hell in the first preseason game. He looked terrible in the second preseason game. I don't want to hear about how he settled into the game after throwing 2 interceptions. He threw 2 interceptions. There's no settling down into the game after that. He still had a bad performance. This is what happens with Daniel Jones. He has 2 really bad plays, explosively bad plays, and then he throws 5 good passes later on in the game, and people point to the 5 over the 2. That's not how this works. The 2 are so much more detrimental than the 5 good passes. It doesn't get weighed on the same scale. It was an awful performance. I'm not saying Tommy DeVito played any better. I was joking around on Twitter yesterday, and I was like, "Give me the cutlets, Tommy DeVito, baby." A lot of people were upset with me, but that's not what this is. This is really just me not wanting to watch Daniel Jones and wanting to suffer through another Daniel Jones season where he throws picks and people make excuses for him. So I'd rather watch Tommy DeVito play. You can't make excuses for him. He's an undrafted rookie. You know he's not going to be a superstar at any point in his career. So just let him play. I don't want to suffer through Daniel Jones, lose the games, whatever. They're going to win or lose either way. I just can't stand the narrative around Daniel Jones right now. The excuses that people are making after such an abysmal week 2 preseason performance.
Yeah, and while you were talking, I wanted to pull up the box score from the game, and box scores don't always tell the full story, but just wanted to point out 11-18, $138 passing, 7.7 yards per attempt, no touchdowns, 2 picks, 45.4 rating. DeVito was 10-19, 75 yards passing, 3.9 yards per attempt, no touchdowns, no picks, 62.4 rating. So really none of those guys crazy jumped off the page, and not every interception is created equal. So it's sometimes the context is very much so needed, but not in this case, because both of those throws were bad. Like there's no sugarcoating it. The one that was in their own end, how are you still making that throw in year 6, Anthony? How is that still an issue for this guy? That's something that if you see your rookie quarterback try to make that throw, you go, all right, I get it. They don't have the experience. But how many games does Daniel Jones have under his belt now starting in this league? You have to know at that point that you can't throw that ball in the flat. And he did. And was it a pick 6 or was he tackled right before the goal line? I forget.
That was pick 6, man.
Right.
Daniel Jones scored more points for the other team than he did for his own team in this game. And let me just say this about that pick 6. Yeah, it was ugly. I'm not going to beat the dead horse. It was terrible. He broke the first sack that he invited into himself. If you rewatch the play, he had a pocket that he could have stepped into. Whatever. Everybody's breaking it down to exhaust. I know JT Sullivan, QB School, broke it down in a video yesterday, and he kind of put some of the blame on Malik Neighbors as well, but put all the blame eventually on Daniel Jones because he should have just thrown it away. We know all this, but I just want to highlight one thing. 60 games Daniel Jones has started in his career. He is an experienced veteran entering his 6th season in the NFL. He has won a playoff game, and he is making a mistake like this. Think about this. He throws that interception, pick 6. They get the ball back. He throws the next interception. The Texans get the ball at the 2-yard line. I don't know if you saw the next drive, but CJ Stroud takes a snap in the shotgun, like 8 yards deep into his own end zone. Pressure right across his face. Steps back, steps to the side, steps into a new clean pocket, delivers a 15-yard pass to Tank Dell across the middle of the field for a first down. That was the difference to me. I haven't seen anybody talk about the comparisons here. We were talking about 60 starts, 60-year Daniel Jones not knowing how to navigate pressure in the end zone, in the front of the end zone, off of a play-action play, quick, easy passing play. He has no idea what to do, almost takes a safety, instead throws a pick 6. Then you have CJ Stroud, who's in his 2nd season, hasn't even played 17 games in the NFL just yet. He's standing in the pocket, in the middle of the end zone, deep in the end zone, pressure in his face, delivers a 15-yard pass for first down. That tells you everything that you need to know. If you were wondering whether or not the Giants this offseason should have moved on from Daniel Jones, should have found a younger, better, more high upside talent at the quarterback position, that 2-play sequence should be the answers to your question. That right there, CJ Stroud showed you exactly why Daniel Jones has not shown nearly enough progress in the past 5 years to be an established QB1 franchise quarterback for the Giants. I thought that was the best way just to compare and contrast. I think I might even do a video, break it down on Twitter or something later today, because that was really what highlighted to me. We are seeing a 6-year veteran making rookie mistakes. We are seeing a 2nd-year player with legitimate star upside and talent washing him, making Daniel Jones look like an absolute college quarterback.
I forget who had it on Twitter. It was a relatively big personality. Maybe I say it might spark something for you, and who had it. But I saw my favorite reaction to Daniel Jones's performance was maybe the Giants shouldn't have been so vocal about moving on from him in Hard Knocks and killed his confidence. I don't want to. I maybe Florio. It could have been Florio. I saw it somewhere and I said I have to bring this up on the show because that Anthony might catch a heart attack after hearing that.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if anything, okay, killing Daniel Jones's confidence in that way, no. Put a chip on your shoulder, Daniel Jones. Like, respond. Say, no, we don't need a rookie. I am the guy. Going out there and having your confidence killed, that's just weak. And if that's how they feel, if that's the excuse that we want to make for Daniel Jones now, feel as though he got his confidence killed, I mean, come on, he plays in New York. If you were ever going to get your confidence killed on a daily basis in any city as the quarterback, it's going to be in New York. This is one of the main reasons that the Giants drafted Daniel Jones, because they felt like he could take the noise and he could be a New York quarterback who never gets his confidence killed. So if that's now where we're at 6 years into the Daniel Jones experience, making excuses like that, I really don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to say. All of this has just become ridiculous. Again, it's been over 5 years of this shit. Like, if he's not playing at a decent starter level now, I don't know when he ever will be.
I found it. I found the tweet. It was Florio. I was right. I'm just spitballing here, but maybe the open and persistent conversation about upgrading a quarterback during the offseason Hard Knocks has affected their current quarterback's confidence a little bit. I'm sorry. I just can't take that seriously. I really can't.
It's like the most unserious comment that I've seen from the weekend about Daniel Jones, truthfully. I just, like I said, he was drafted because of his confidence and his ability to navigate the media and never let anything affect him. And here we are. So the excuses never end.
Yeah, no, it doesn't seem that way. And that was I would say biggest takeaway from the preseason game. Was there anything else you wanted to get into from the Giants pass game before we move on and get into our next topic here?
Elijah Chapman hustling his ass like 40 yards downfield to make a run stop was sick. I think, we've talked about him a lot on the channel. I think he secured a roster spot with that play, maybe even earns a starting spot. Secondary looks like it's a problem. Offensive line, though, looked excellent. And that's the thing. We talk all the time about Daniel Jones and how he never plays well because he never has a good offensive line in front of him. Well, he was only pressured one time. They surrendered 1 or 3 pressures total in the entire 4 quarters of the game, the offensive line did. Every pocket was spacious. It was clean. If the offensive line continues that during the regular season, there are legitimately 0 excuses that you can make for Daniel Jones. The offensive line looked excellent in that game. So, yeah, that was a really positive takeaway is the performance of the offensive line, but almost everything else was pretty negative. Like, I thought that Daniel Jones and the quarterbacks, Tommy DeVito as well, just didn't look good. The defense looked really poor. So, yeah, not the most encouraging preseason week 2 game.
First thing we wanted to get into for the New York Jets is it sounds like reading the tea leaves a little bit from comments from Aaron Rodgers and Robert Saleh that they will not be playing in this upcoming preseason game against the New York Giants. There is joint practice tomorrow, which we can get into a little bit, but this coming off the heels of preseason week 2, Jets didn't play essentially any regulars. The highlight was a Will McDonald spin move that resulted in a sack. And then other than that, just a boring field goal fest. Neither Adrian Martinez or Andrew Peasley did anything with the ball offensively. It was rough. It was not the cleanest of watches. So not really a ton of takeaways there because a lot of guys who played probably unfortunately aren't making this roster. But I think a big talking point for the Jets this week is, one, are their starters going to play? And again, it feels like as of right now, that's not the case. Robert Saleh said that they'll make their final decision after joint practice on Wednesday. But the Jets have kind of been using these practices. They had one against Washington and one against Carolina as the reps for their starters and the guys who are going to actually play. So while you might not get Rodgers and company against the Giants on Saturday, you likely on Wednesday, tomorrow, they're going to use that as a scrimmage. So I guess just thoughts on what you're expecting to see or want to see out of joint practice tomorrow.
Well, I think the joint practice conversation is always tricky because, sure, it is a good opportunity for the starters to play at almost game speed. Maybe it could be more valuable to them than you would see a preseason game being, just because you're getting physicality, you're getting nearly live game reps, but you're not getting the exact same amount of risk of injury as you do in live game reps. And I think the second part of what I want to say is like that's not the case for the quarterbacks because they're not allowed to be touched during these live joint practices. And that was the argument that I made for Daniel Jones last week. Like people were saying, why would he play in that preseason game? They just had a physical week of practice with the Lions beforehand. That was his preseason. And I said, guys, Daniel Jones can't get touched in those games. Look at how immediately when he got touched in that Texans game, he threw a pick six. That's the difference. But for the Jets here, does that really matter for Aaron Rodgers? I mean, he's been in the league for how long now? Does he really need the live game reps of getting hit from NFL defensive linemen? Probably not. So I think that the Jets are better positioned to get away with that. Rodgers doesn't necessarily need those reps. I think that Rodgers is preseason ready or regular season ready. He goes on the week one and he's ready to go. He's not one of those players that really needs that. However, I do think that Peter makes a good point here in saying the offensive line has been reshaped quite a bit. It might be very helpful to get those starters on the offensive line and start to create some of that synergy and create some of that chemistry across the starting five. So there's an argument to be made for and against playing the starters. As you guys know on this channel over the past 2 weeks, I'm an advocate for playing the starters. Like always, I think it's important. You can get hurt anytime you get hurt in practice. I mean, hell, Rodgers could get hurt during these joint practices without being touched. Like you have a risk of getting an injury every time you play football, whether it's a practice, scrimmage, preseason game, regular season game. If you're not going to play at all in the preseason, to me, that's playing scared. And when you play scared is when you increase your risk of injury. So I'm in agreement with Peter here. My argument's always going to be get the starters out there, get them building chemistry, get them in the flow of things, play them for just a drive if you need to. It makes all the difference in the world in my eyes.
Yeah, and for the Jets offensive line, good point by Peter and a good call out from you to highlight this. John Simpson, Tyron Smith, Morgan Moses, 3 new starters on the offensive line. They haven't played in a game yet together. Obviously, they've practiced together. They've done joint practices together. So I think that would be like there's a benefit in playing them, but like Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses and Aaron Rodgers, like those 3, John Simpson could probably use reps, but you kind of know what those guys are. And I think you're kind of hoping that, you know, the chemistry is just going to be there because they've done this for so long and they play at a high level. It's not like you're trying to get, you know, like last year, the Jets didn't get Dwayne Brown back onto the field until very, very late in August. And that unfortunately just was not a very talented offensive line after all, with Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton as your tackles. You're hoping that with Morgan Moses and Tyron Smith, it's, you know, a significant upgrade talent wise, and having Olu Fashanu waiting in the wings is an upgrade talent wise that they'll kind of just be able to figure it out. But again, it's a valid concern to bring up, especially on the offensive line, and getting them to go. So I don't know. I find myself going back and forth with it. I could see both sides of the coin in this argument, of getting the reps and trying to build that chemistry, and then also like not wanting to risk injury here, because unfortunately we've seen what losing Aaron Rodgers could do for this team. So it's tough. I don't think it's so, you know, black and white.
No, it's not. It's a nuanced conversation. Like you do have to do the cost benefit analysis. What are the risks? What is the reward? You have to go through all that. But even talking about the offensive line needing some of that chemistry and needing to gel, even the defensive line, I think for the Jets on the other side of the ball with Hassan Reddick out, I think all those guys who might be playing in place of Hassan Reddick, they need those reps. They need as many of them as possible because they're probably not going to get them during the regular season. I assume somehow, some way, the problem will get solved. Hassan Reddick will play for the Jets at some point this year. If that's true, those guys who are going to lose out on playing time because Reddick's back in the lineup probably need these reps right now so that they can continue to develop, and so that if anything happens where Reddick is off the field once again during the season, they are ready to go. They've been developed and they're sharp. So I think it's just all about building chemistry and just getting used to making mistakes. That's really what the preseason is. Get those mistakes out. And I'll even make that argument for Daniel Jones with that interception. I'm glad that he was on the field to throw that pick, because hopefully he doesn't throw interceptions like that during the regular season now as a result of throwing it in a week 2 preseason game, which again is why he should have played in that first preseason game. But I'll digress off that. Before the Jets, I think that there is a lot to be gained from having some of these starters go out there, especially the young starters like Olu, whether he's starting week 1 or not, you know, probably not, but still, these young players that they have, Malachi Corley, for example, how much is he really going to play in the regular season? We're not sure, but let him go out there in the preseason, get those live game reps. I mean, that's a player that we talked about early on in the training camp. he's not really going to gain a whole ton out of playing padless practices anyway. That's a tackle breaker. That's a machine with the ball in his hands. So is Braylon Allen. There are young guys out there who need these reps, and I do think that those players who are playing in large roles, the starters across the board, they'll find value in playing these games. They will benefit from playing in them, whether they like it or not. I do think it's important.
Now, let me pitch you these two different scenarios. I'm curious to see what your take is or response on it. What the first is, would you feel comfortable playing Aaron Rodgers if Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses are not playing? So that Olu would be in one of the spots and either Carter Warner, Max Mitchell. And then the flip side of that is, do you see value if they just held Aaron Rodgers out and it was Tyrod Taylor, but essentially a good chunk of the starters? Are you good with one and not the other? Like, where do you stand on either one of those scenarios? Because that's also kind of a topic of discussion on Jets Twitter and of amongst Jets fans right now.
I do agree that if you're putting your quarterback on the field, you put the starting offensive line out there with him. You put your best five in front of him and you make sure that he is well protected. Not only because you don't want him to get hit, you don't want him to get injured, but also just because during the regular season, when he's calling audibles at the line of scrimmage or calling pass protection, he's calling it with the first team, with the starters, and they need to be on the same wavelength and on the same page. I think that one thing that you could see in a preseason, let's say Rodgers gets on their center, he calls one protection, he wants the offensive line to slide left, for example, because he thinks that a blitzer, a cornerback is blitzing that way. Okay, all of a sudden, the offensive line accidentally slides right. Rodgers gets sacked in a preseason game. That's a learning moment. Now they get to have a conversation. They get to say, hey, when you hear this signal, slide left. It's not slide right. So I wanted you to pick up that guy, not this guy. Okay, so now we're in the regular season. He calls the same protection. They got it right. That's where you want those mistakes to be made in the preseason. And that's where you want Rodgers building that chemistry with his offensive line. So if the quarterback's going out there, the starting five goes out in front of him. And I think that, again, it's important to keep him protected, but it's also important to get that chemistry going. This is a very communicative game. There is a lot here. It is a team sport. The biggest team sport, I think, of any of the sports. You talk about soccer, basketball, football is the team sport. So that's why, I just always advocate for putting the starters out there, at least for a drive. It's only 8 snaps. If you're getting hurt in 8 snaps, and I know that's PTSD for the Jets and Rodgers, I mean, that's just bad luck. That's not bad preparation. That's not bad practice. That's just bad luck. So I don't think that you can play scared, be afraid of bad luck and lightning striking twice. I just think that you have to go out there and go through the process and get your team ready to roll for the regular season.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I was just thinking back of Jets and Giants preseason games of old. This might be a touch before your time, but Mark Sanchez getting put in the game against the Giants with the backup offensive line, and he ends up getting hurt, and the Jets lost him for the season back in 2013.
Yeah, how about how long ago was that? Man, it was before that second Super Bowl. I want to say it was 2008, 9, or 10, in somewhere in that range. Uh, Eli Manning out there with the second team offensive line in a preseason game against the Jets, gets hit from behind, gets hit into Brandon Jacobs, his running back, splits his forehead open, has 16 stitches. Remember that one? That was wild.
Yeah, that
That
was
was actually one of the crazier moments that I've ever seen in a preseason game. He didn't miss a regular season game, but yeah, it does highlight the fact that you got him out there. You want his starters out there with him.
exact. That was I remember the year because that was 2010 because that was the Hard Knocks season for the Jets. So I remember that Hard Knocks episode as well. That was a crazy one. He was cut pretty good on that play. But moral of the story: don't put your starting quarterback with backup offensive linemen out there. Things don't usually tend to go very well when that's the case. But again, just kind of putting a bow on this one. Joint practice this week between these two teams. They'll be out there on Wednesday, so we could be able to recap that on Thursday and preview this game against the Giants a little bit more then. But as of now, feels like no starters for the New York Jets. Now, back to the Giants here. Clearing some cap space yesterday. The Giants out there making some moves to clear some cap space. Break it down for me. What happened and what do you think the reasoning behind it was?
Yeah, so the Giants cleared some cap space by restructuring star left tackle Andrew Thomas's contract. This is a move that they've had the ability to make all summer long. They just haven't made it until now. So it's really sparked a lot of conversation. Like, why are the Giants making this move now? Like, what's the reason for it? at this late in the preseason that they would restructure Andrew Thomas's contract, make things a little bit more difficult in the cap space in the future, but clear up more cap space right now at the end of the offseason. It's a little bit perplexing, but I think that if you kind of walk through it and discuss it, you can come to a realization. The Giants added $3.34 million in cap space by making this move. They reportedly have $18 million in total salary cap space right now. That's a pretty significant amount of money. But I think if you walk through it, it's not like I don't think they're ready to go out there and make some big splash, make some blockbuster trade. It's not like Brandon Ayuk is coming to New York, guys. It's nothing like that. It's probably just the fact that the Giants have seen their roster play for the last 2 weeks in preseason and are like, holy crap, we need to do a lot of work on the waiver wire. So they're going to end up cutting guys with dead cap hits. That's going to take up some of their salary cap space. And they're going to end up signing guys off of the waiver wire that's going to add to their salary cap. That's what I think this truly is. Again, a lot of Giants fans are like, oh, they're totally going out there to sign a cornerback. Maybe they're going to trade for Marshawn Lattimore. Maybe they're going to bring in a new. No, they're just trying to set themselves up so that at the waiver wire next weekend or next 2 weeks from now, whatever it is, once all those players get shook free and there's some decent talent available, Giants want to be able to make all of their moves uninterrupted and not have to worry about clearing cap space elsewhere. So that's what I think this is. I think it's a really important and clever move from Joe Schoen. I don't think that it really hinders the team in the future. I think that it just helps them create a little bit more flexibility this offseason. That's always been the word that I use to describe Joe Schoen and the way he moves in the offseason. Flexibility. Every offseason, he creates the most flexible contracts, makes the most flexible roster moves. That's what I really do appreciate about him as the general manager. And I think this is just another instance of flexibility.
Yeah, for the Giants and for all these teams, really, but there's going to be an opportunity here where guys shake loose from rosters. And we saw it last year. I know we bring it up a lot, but the connection with the Jets and the Giants, they grabbed Jason Pinnock and added him to the roster. And he's played a lot for the Giants over the last couple of years. So there's going to be an opportunity for them to add certain groups. And you know, the corner room for the Giants is one that we've talked on a lot. I would imagine that maybe the interior defensive line as well is a spot where they might look to add some bodies. But is there any names I mean, you just mentioned that they might cut someone loose who has a little bit of a dead cap hit. Is there somebody jumping out to you that fits that description?
Not necessarily right now. I'd have to honestly take a closer look at the salary cap space. I think that, they have a lot of wide receivers on this roster that would make a lot of rosters. And I think that, one of them is going to shake free and get cut at the end of the preseason. But I think more so, if you were to take a look at this Giants team and say, okay, could they make any kind of splash move, anything that's exciting enough to say, oh, I didn't see that one coming? I remember last offseason, the Giants made two moves. They made one before the final preseason game, which was trading for Isaiah Simmons. They sent a 7th-round pick, traded for him. He played in that game against the Jets. That was his first action in a Giants uniform. That was a big-time move that they made for a very low cost. And then at the end of the preseason, during cut day, they traded for Boogie Basham Jr., who's now a core depth piece on this defense. That's what I'm thinking you're going to see from this Giants team. They're going to go through. They're going to cut some of these guys. Sure, there's going to be surprise cuts. Maybe Isaiah Hodgins is kind of the guy to answer your question. He could end up getting released, and maybe that opens up the number 18 for Malik Neighbors to wear. Who knows? Because he still hasn't decided on his number. All those things could happen, but I think once we get to the end of this preseason, keep an eye on Joe Schoen making a trade. Like, that's first and foremost. He loves to make trades, and he loves to extract as much value off of the waiver wire as he can, whether that's putting in claims or trading for players who were about to be released. And I think that Boogie Basham is a good example. And this year, I think you can look around. This cornerback market is kind of robust. We've heard some buzz about J.C. Horn of the Carolina Panthers, former top 10 pick. Hasn't stayed healthy at any point in his career, but when he's healthy, we all know he's a great player. He might end up needing a change of scenery this offseason. The Giants, the Panthers, great relationship. Brian Burns trade happened earlier this offseason. Maybe Joe Schoen looks to add some cornerback help. How about over in Buffalo? We know Joe Schoen has that connection. Kyer Elam, another young cornerback who has been phased out of that defense, healthy scratch. Maybe he needs a change of scenery. That's the kind of low-key move that you can expect from Joe Schoen between now and the start of the regular season. And so that's what I really think this cap space clearing is, just to give them more flexibility to where if they know a guy is going to hit the waiver wire, they can go ahead and claim him. Or if they know he's not going to hit the waiver wire, or if he hits the waiver wire, a team ahead of them might claim him, they can get flexible here with some late round draft capital, make a trade to bring in some sort of talent at a position of need. So that's what I'm looking forward to. I think that Joe Shane will probably make one of those trades again. He loves to do it. Jordan Phillips trade last week was similar, but
Yep.
not the same. I think that they're going to do something this upcoming week though that brings in some cornerback help and just gives them a little bit more high upside with a young talent.
Well, with that Jordan Phillips trade, you got a future 6th round pick for it. So maybe that's some capital that you could utilize to get a player who might end up being cut anyway, because like these trades aren't going to cost you a whole lot to get you a fringe roster player somewhere else.
Right, like I said, it was a 7th round pick for Isaiah Simmons. I think it was also 7th or 6th round pick for Boogie Basham. So it's low cost moves and high upside, high reward moves. When the risk is that low, and you're talking about a draft pick for a player that maybe doesn't even make your team out of training camp with a 7th round pick, why not ship that for a veteran in his 3rd or 4th season who needs a change of scenery, who you know will make your roster? Makes a ton of sense to me. Still young guys in Isaiah Simmons. I mean, he got an extension. He's still here. Bookie Basham's still a young player, former 2nd round pick. Those players have more talent and potential than most of those 7th round picks that you're going to be taking anyways with those draft selections. So I love that idea. I think that's one of the smartest things that Joe Shane does, and he's done it several times, and I'm expecting him to do it once again between now and the start of the regular season.
Plumber Mo is asking all the questions that we need to know. Anthony, do you think they will keep Tommy DeVito?
All right, first and foremost, Plumber Mo, that profile picture is incredible. I love that so much, and I need that. So if you could find me on Twitter and send me that just so I can make it like my phone wallpaper or something, the N with the
That needs to be
DeVito
like
tint as
tattooed
the
on your
Y,
body. That needs to be permanent.
that's going right here over my heart. I'm getting that tattooed. That is awesome. But to answer your question, yes, the Giants are going to keep Tommy DeVito. They're going to hold 3 quarterbacks this year. I'll break down quickly some of the reasons why. Daniel Jones and the injury clause in his contract that guarantees things. They need to have more flexibility at the position. Drew Lock being a little hobbled with an injury, probably healthy enough to play this week, but still, you never know when things flare up. Look around the NFL last year, how many quarterbacks went down with significant injuries? The Jets, the Bengals, teams all across the NFL dealt with significant injuries. The Chargers as well, to their starting quarterbacks, and they got down to quarterback 2, quarterback 3. The Giants got down to quarterback 3 last year when Tyrod Taylor got hurt after Daniel Jones. The Giants are going to keep Tommy DeVito. It's very necessary in the modern NFL to hold 3 quarterbacks. And for a player who's now in the 2nd year of the system, knows the offense, all of that stuff, I do think that Tommy DeVito is just an important player to keep around.
Look at this. Plumber Mo is not on X, but he's going to create an account just to send that to. That is some significant dedication from
That's
our
so
guy.
real. That's incredible. Thank you, Plumber Mo. That's awesome.
Things you just absolutely love to see. Now, Johnny Boy is back with us, and he asked a very important question. I think you would love to do this move. Can we trade Hassan Reddick for Malik Neighbors? Come on, Ant.
I don't even know what to say. I'm like speechless. No. The answer is no.
You don't think the Giants could use some extra pass rush help? I'm surprised at you.
You know what? No, I just think that Malik Neighbors is he's here to stay, man.
What if you how about a veteran wide receiver going the other way because they're taking on a receiver like Alan Lazard could probably use a change of scenery.
I could see the smirk on your face while you were saying that. I knew you were about to say something ridiculous.
Oh goodness! All right, he has a real question for us though. Surprise cuts for both teams. I think for the Jets is either Gibson or Brownlee. Giants, I would say everyone. Haha, just kidding. All right, so a surprise cut for the New York Giants. Who are you thinking?
Is Isaiah Hodgins still a surprise cut to people? I feel like he is. That's the one that stands out to me. That's really the main one because I think when you look at this team, you know that like most of these guys are not great, like 53-man roster players. So I think that you have to look to Isaiah Hodgins as a player who, was formerly a starting receiver on this team. He could end up getting released. I think, I don't want to say Evan Neal. I don't think that contract is cuttable. Maybe they try and ship him, but I don't think so. I think they want to keep him as depth anyway. So yeah, I'm just gonna go out there and say Isaiah Hodgins is probably the player who would be the most surprising cut candidate.
For the Jet, I would be really surprised, and I guess that fits the question here, if Gibson was cut, just because like in their 3 wide personnel, I would think that he is the starting slot right now over Malachi Corley. Not saying that I agree with it, but we've talked about this a ton on the show already about how the Jets like to bring on their young guys, especially at wide receiver, pretty slow. And they really like Gibson a lot. I think Brownlee is a good answer. He didn't have a particularly great preseason game in week 2, had a couple drops and some 50-50 balls you would have liked to see him come down with. And there's just a lot of names that are in the wide receiver mix. I mean, Brandon Smith has had a little bit of a connection in the second half of these preseason games. He's fighting for a roster spot. Irv Charles might be a sneaky surprise cut. So he's listed as a wide receiver, but he's pretty much just a special teamer. And ever since the Jets lost Justin Hardy, who was their core special teamer the last 2-3 years or so, the assumption by a lot of people was, oh, Irv Charles is going to make the team because he had that forced fumble that one time against Denver last year, but he hasn't really been great. And you've had names like Quantez Stiggers and Brandon Eccles come on in that gunner role. So maybe if they cut Irv Charles, that could be a surprise to some, but there's really not a ton of names here that would shock me. Maybe Tack McKinley getting cut at this point, because I think he's done enough to make the roster. He's a veteran who's stood out. So I don't know. This is hard. I think for both these teams, a lot of the decisions feel pretty cut and dry, and there's not going to be too many out there surprises.
Yeah, I do agree with you, especially for the Giants. I mean, who really would shock you to see get released on such a bad roster? It's kind of like that question. But obviously, once we get through this final preseason game, we'll do some sort of preview on cut day and discuss like who we really think is going to make the final 53. I mean, I'm sure that there's somebody in the secondary that I'm not thinking of or on the offensive line who could get cut, and it would be surprising. But just generally speaking, I think we know who we got here on this Giants team, and we know that the majority of these players getting cut just don't deserve the NFL roster spot.
Absolutely. BSK asks, Clemens has been getting some praise from the coaching, but I haven't seen it. Of course, I'm no one. Don't say that, BSK. Have you guys seen Clemens improving through the preseason? Michael Clemens, Jets, 4th round pick from the 2022 draft class. I am not a Michael Clemens guy. There are a lot of Jet fans who are, and I get a lot of hate because I'm not the biggest fan. I think he's a little overrated by some Jet fans here and by the staff, honestly, because in Hassan Reddick's absence, he's been lining up as a starter, which that Michael Clemens being a starter scares the life out of me. He's pretty solid against the run. We'll give him that. He's solid against the run. He gives you nothing as a pass rusher, and he hasn't really stood out in any of the preseason games. Again, the coaches love him, so I don't think he's going to necessarily get cut here, but he hasn't done anything that really has jumped out to me. Do you have any opinion on Michael Clemens here, Anthony?
I mean, on one hand, the coaching staff loves him, and we've praised the coaching staff a lot and said that they have an eye for that young defensive talent. They're really good at developing that young defensive talent. So it's almost like I wouldn't want to see him get released because they like him, and there's probably something that they have planned for him, and there's probably something that they can unlock from him. Then again, Tack McKinley has looked so great all summer, and he's less than 2 years older than Michael Clemens. He's still relatively young and has something to be unlocked maybe. So if Michael Clemens does get cut, it's probably because of how well Tack McKinley's played. So yeah, it'll be interesting. He probably makes the roster, like you said, because the coaching staff loves him, but the Jets do have options there. So I guess anything can happen.
Yeah, Michael Clemens is just entering his 3rd year, turns 27 tomorrow. So it was an older draft pick, 25 coming out, but again, the coaching staff likes him, so I would not be surprised if he's here. Let's get to last Jets thing. Some positive news here. Mike Williams returned. So he's been back at practice, but just during the individual things. And he shared with the media yesterday that he expects to be back in team drill starting next week. So he is someone that we definitely won't be seeing in this preseason game, and likely won't see much of at all in this joint practice. But exciting news for Mike Williams, who will have probably a 2-week ramp up period with the team before the start of the regular season. So injury update for Mike Williams, expected to be back during team drills next week. Your thoughts on the Williams return?
I think it's awesome. I think this is really exciting news for the Jets. It's really exciting news for Aaron Rodgers. Going way back in time when we were first doing the show, like when it was a baby, we were talking about Mike Williams potentially signing with the Jets and how he is the perfect signing for Aaron Rodgers in particular, just based on playing style and everything. So, yeah, this is exciting stuff. I think that Mike Williams provides something to the offense that the other wide receivers simply don't, just as a vertical outside back shoulder threat. One of those guys who can go up there and make some spectacular grabs barring health. He's got to stay healthy, and that's obviously been a struggle throughout his career. But this is one of those players that can be pretty dynamic in the Jets offense and give a lot of upside and value to a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers. So definitely excited to see Mike Williams returning. Obviously, you said he's returning during practice this week. Maybe we see a little Mike Williams versus Deontay Banks. I feel like that's a really nice matchup in those practices. Banks being one of those speedy, physical cornerbacks who likes to get in the face of the receiver. Mike Williams being one of those physical receivers that likes when quarterbacks get in his face. So I think that might be a little bit fun of a matchup to keep an eye on during those practices. If Williams does suit up for the scrimmages, again, I don't know how much he's going to be doing during practices this week, but still a big get back for the Jets. A very important player, I think, for this offense.
Yeah, absolutely. He's going to give the Jets offense something that they've kind of been lacking a little bit the last few years. And that's, in my opinion, a true red zone threat at wide receiver. They brought in Allen Lazard, who was supposed to be that with Aaron Rodgers. And unfortunately, that one just really hasn't worked out all that great. But Mike Williams, a much higher ceiling player, also helps him stretch the field. I mean, the last time I was looking it up this morning, the last time he played a full season in 2022, 27 of his 63 or 64 catches were 10 plus yards down the field. So he's going to help you push the ball down the field and give you a big body in the red zone to kind of just throw it up and let him go up and get it. And hopefully that converts to some more touchdowns because the Jets red zone offense was abysmal last year. But I'm excited for Mike Williams. I just wonder, how quickly do we see his impact on the Jets? Like I think the first month or so of the year, we might only see him have like a few catches a game, just because I think they'll bring him on slowly from the injury. But when do you think you could see like a 100% Mike Williams out there?
I feel like usually with these players returning from knee injuries, it takes them about a month of football, a month of getting out there. So I would say by week 4 to 6, somewhere in there is when you see Mike Williams get to 100% and start playing a lot for the Jets. I think in the meantime, you'll probably see him rotating a little bit with Malachi Corley, and Corley gets more playing time as a result, and that's exciting enough for the Jets. But I do think probably by week 4 or something, we see Mike Williams return towards full strength.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at too. I mean, last year was for Brees Hall was very similar. He had his first like huge game against Denver in week 5. And then Nathaniel Hackett remembered that he could catch the football against the Giants in week 9 last year. I'm pretty sure the Jets and Giants played. So at the end of October, that seems about right. I'm in on that, but just kind of excited to see this full offense come together, and haven't seen it in the preseason yet. I don't think we will get to see the offense making this thing come full circle, but we're so close to the start of the regular season. It feels like we could taste it now, and Williams getting back in gear is a plus. I'll take that.
No doubt. Love to see it. Love to see the team get healthy right in time for the regular season. And like I said, I think that Mike Williams has the potential to be a really dynamic player in this Jets offense, and kind of just what the doctor ordered for Aaron Rodgers and his ability to push the ball downfield.
I love it. So before we get out of here, any predictions for tomorrow's joint practice? How many fights? Who starts them? Who wins them? What are we thinking?
Definitely think Sauce Gardner and Malik Neighbors are going to get into it at one point or another. Just think that's like such an explosive and exciting matchup. Somebody's going to tap one another on the helmet, and we're going to see a little bit of a fight like we saw with Kirby Joseph and Malik Neighbors during those Lions practices. So we'll get a couple fights, and we should get some really interesting takeaways from these practices and a lot of fun stuff to talk about on this channel in particular.
I love it. That's going to do it for us in this episode. We will be back on Thursday to talk all things joint practice from Jets and Giants. We'll give you a preview of the Jets and Giants preseason matchup. Make sure to follow Anthony's work over on Fireside Giants. You can find me at Matt O'Leary NY or over on Talking Jets. Make sure to leave a like before you go. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We'll catch you next time.